Hi there, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Today's story, it begins with one message that wasn't meant for me. It buzzed onto my phone while I was unclogging the shower drain. Disgusting task, by the way, made worse when your wife won't stop reminding you she married an artist, not a plumber. I fished out the gunk, hair, sludge, the usual existential dread, wiped my hands on a towel, and tapped the screen with my elbow like some kind of overtrained dog. And then I froze. It was from my wife, but not to me. It had landed in our shared iCloud account, the one we only ever used for syncing calendars and grocery lists. It popped up like any other notification, but this one had fangs. He's so dumb. He'll never leave us. No context, no emojis, no autocorrect to save her, just that. I stared at it like it had insulted my mother, and then it hit me. Us. Who the hell was us? At first, I thought it had to be about someone else. A friend, maybe, a coworker. But Willow wasn't the gossip with the girls type. She was efficient, cold, strategic. She scheduled fun the way I scheduled dentist appointments, reluctantly and only when absolutely necessary. Then another message came in. Still down for Thursday? He won't even notice. I'll say I have a client call. I dropped the phone, like actually dropped it. It landed screen down on the tile with a slap that sounded way too final. I didn't even check if it cracked. I just sat down, right there, on the wet bathroom floor, like someone hit pause on the movie of my life. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. She was cheating. That part was now obvious, but what hurt more than anything was how confidently she did it. Not scared, not guilty, not remorseful. She was laughing at me behind my back. I was a punchline, a placeholder, a houseplant with a mortgage. I picked the phone back up, and I did something I never thought I'd do. I responded. Wanted bad, just that. 3 words, no punctuation, no threats, no anger, and then I stood up, brushed the lint off my sweatpants, and walked downstairs like nothing had happened. She was in the kitchen, sipping some overpriced wellness drink and scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world had just sprung a leak. Hey babe, she said, not even looking up. Did you fix the drain? I nodded, didn't say a word. She went back to scrolling. I opened the fridge and stared inside, not seeing anything. Because my mind wasn't on groceries anymore, it was somewhere else, building a plan, a quiet one she wouldn't see coming. And the best part, her lover, that smug, invisible shadow lurking in my marriage, had no idea who I was about to have dinner with. But trust me, he found out. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the texts or the realization that the woman I shared my home, bed, and Netflix password with was sneaking around behind my back. No, the hardest part was pretending that I didn't know, pretending that her phone didn't slip up and expose the carefully arranged charade she built brick by brick while I was busy alphabetizing the spice rack like an idiot. That night, I couldn't sleep. She dozed off instantly. Of course, like a woman with nothing to hide, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles, trying to count my breaths like the self help podcasts say. It didn't work. My brain was sprinting laps around the track of what ifs, whens, and how could use. She rolled over at one point and rested her hand on my chest, the same hand that probably caressed someone else hours before. I lay there like a corpse, breathing shallow, eyes open, heart burning. By morning, I had a plan. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to fight. What I wanted was a moment, one perfect moment where everything flipped, where she was the one trying to understand what had just happened, where her smug little world of secrets unraveled like cheap gift wrap. I spent that entire day in silence. I didn't confront her. I didn't even look at her longer than necessary, and she didn't notice. She was glued to her phone, probably deleting every trace of her affair like a nervous teenager clearing browser history. But I still had access to that iCloud, still had eyes on the private messages she thought she'd buried. Turns out his name was Marshall. Of course it was. The kind of name that sounds like a guy who owns leather boots he doesn't wear for walking. Real estate agent, drives a matte black Range Rover, and uses networking as a verb. I dug a little. It didn't take much. He had a public profile, his face was on billboards, his smile was as fake as his tan. I stared at his face longer than I should have. Then I made the call. There's this restaurant she always talks about, some upscale farm to table place with lighting so dim it makes everyone look better. She's been begging me to take her there for years. I always said no, not because I didn't want to, I just couldn't justify the cost. But suddenly, the idea of making a reservation for two sounded right, but not with her. I called the one person she would never expect, a woman named Margot. Now, you probably don't know who Margot is, but Willa does. Oh, she knows. Margot and Willa used to be friends, the kind of friends who drink wine together and talk about everyone who isn't in the room. That ended 2 years ago when Willa threw her under the bus at a company event, took credit for Margot's project, pitched it as her own, and smiled her way into a promotion. Margot quit the next day, but she didn't forget, so I reached out, awkwardly, nervously. I told her everything, and to my shock, she didn't hang up. She didn't laugh. She just said, "Tell me where and when." I picked Thursday. The same night Willa told Marshall she'd be on a call. Perfect. I told Willa I'd be heading out that evening. Made up some story about a local business networking dinner. She barely acknowledged it, just nodded and tapped something into her phone. That evening, I wore the shirt she always said made me look tired. I wore it on purpose. I arrived first, picked the corner table by the window, candlelight flickering, jazz humming softly overhead. It was all too perfect. Margot walked in 10 minutes later. She looked sharp, confident, and judging by the stares from the other diners, absolutely stunning. She sat across from me with a sly smile and said she's going to have a stroke when she sees this. We clinked glasses, and then, right on cue, I saw him. Marshall. He was across the room, standing behind Willa as they waited for their table. She hadn't spotted me yet. She was too busy adjusting her hair in her phone camera, but he saw me, his eyes locked on mine, then to Margot, then back to me. He blinked, once, twice, and then his mouth twitched, not into a smile, not into a frown, but something closer to fear. I raised my glass in his direction. Willa finally turned to see what had caught his attention, and that's when she saw me. Her face. That face I used to memorize like a song, contorted, confusion, panic, shock. I didn't wave. I didn't move. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. And that was only the beginning, because what I found next, what was buried in her cloud storage, made everything up to that moment look like child's play. Willa didn't follow me home that night. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at the door in a dramatic frenzy the way people do in those movies where the villain finally realizes the hero knew all along. No, she stayed at that restaurant with Marshall. I don't know how their dinner went. I imagine it was quiet. Or maybe she covered it up, twisted it, spun a new lie before dessert. She was good at that, rewriting reality on the fly. Meanwhile, I drove home in silence. No music. Just the hum of tires against the road and my heartbeat thudding behind my ribs like someone knocking from the inside. I wasn't proud. I wasn't triumphant. I was numb. The kind of numb that feels like floating in a cold pool at night. No sound, no light, just darkness stretching out in every direction. But there was still more to do. Because what Willa didn't know, and what I hadn't told anyone, not even Margot, was that the iCloud account we used to sync calendars also synced something else. Her notes app. See, Willa had a habit of writing things down, passwords, grocery lists, quotes she thought sounded profound, and sometimes, when she was feeling especially careless, entire outlines of her lies. And thanks to one overlooked setting on her phone, all of it backed up to the cloud. I sat on the couch that night with my laptop open, logged into our shared account. My hands hovered over the keyboard like I was disarming a bomb. Then I clicked into notes. There were dozens. Most were boring. One was a chicken recipe I'd never actually seen her cook. But then I found one titled simply, "For When He Finds Out." My stomach dropped. I clicked. It was a draft. A script, like something a PR team would write for a public apology. Everett, I never wanted to hurt you. I just got lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. It wasn't about him. It was about me. You're a good man. You didn't deserve this. A whole page of carefully crafted damage control. Not one mention of remorse. Not 1 ounce of sincerity. Just positioning. planning, words meant to sound like guilt, but built to protect her image. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I found another note, this one a bit older, titled Thursday Plans. At first glance, it was just a list. Thursday 30, call Marshall 7, pick up wine. 8:15, excuse work call. Then underneath that, I found something worse, a folder. Photos. I opened it, and I swear I didn't breathe for at least a minute. There they were, dozens of pictures of Willa and Marshall, some taken at the same restaurants she used to say were too expensive, others were selfies of the two of them in hotel rooms I didn't recognize. And one, the one that finally broke me, was taken in our backyard. He was standing right where I had planted daffodils the year before. The daffodils, she told me, had died from poor soil. He was holding her waist, smiling like he belonged there. I slammed the laptop shut and just sat there. My whole body was buzzing, like I was about to explode from the inside, but didn't know how to. I thought about smashing something, yelling, driving off into the night, but instead, I made tea. Like a complete fool, I stood in that quiet kitchen, stirring honey into chamomile, while the woman I loved, or maybe just tolerated, lay in the next room pretending to be asleep. And I just kept stirring. I didn't sleep that night either. But by morning, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to blow off her life. I was going to let her lie to me one more time, give her the stage, let her perform. And when she finished, I'd show her I already knew the lines. Saturday mornings used to mean pancakes. That was our tradition. Thick, flour dusted batter, burned on one side because I always got distracted, and Willa pretending to be annoyed while eating every bite. But that morning, I didn't cook. I just sat at the table sipping cold coffee, staring out the window while she patted around the kitchen behind me like nothing had happened. She was humming. Actually humming, that same lazy tune she always hums when she thinks she's in control, when life is lining up just the way she planned it. But her voice had this unnatural sharpness now, like she was forcing lightness she didn't feel. I didn't turn around. I wanted her to speak first. Morning, she said, casual like I hadn't watched her boyfriend's face collapse across the restaurant for me less than 48 hours ago. You were out late Thursday. How'd that work dinner go? I took a sip of coffee. Eventful. She didn't catch the tone. She never really listened. That was our whole marriage, me dropping hints like anchors and her walking around them like puddles. Well, she said, pouring herself a glass of orange juice, you'll be proud of me. I stayed in. Face mask, herbal tea, full detox. I let that sit in the air for a moment. That's nice. Sounds peaceful. It was. I needed it. And there it was, the lie, so smooth it almost felt respectful. I actually admired it for a second. The way she delivered it, like it was truth that had been waiting for the right moment to be spoken. That's when I knew she wasn't even close to confessing. She thought she still had control. That was fine. I had already scheduled the next step. See, before she even opened her eyes that morning, I had an envelope printed and sealed. Inside were 6 photos, not the most explicit ones, nothing that'd get me in trouble, just enough to make her face turn to stone. Along with them, I included a handwritten note, not typed, not copied, just this. You've been performing, so I sat front row. I hope the encore is worth it. I placed the envelope on the hallway table, visible but subtle, the kind of thing that would catch your eye if you passed by in a rush. And then I left. Told her I needed to pick up printer ink. She didn't question it. She was too busy texting Marshall. Yes, I was still reading the messages she had no clue were sinking to the cloud. When I got back, the envelope was gone. I walked inside like nothing had changed. She was in the living room, eyes glued to the TV, posture too stiff, like someone trying very hard to look natural. The silence between us was thicker than ever, and that's when I knew she had opened it. But she didn't say a word. That was the part I didn't expect. No explosion, no confrontation, no tears. She just acted like she hadn't seen it. That was her move now. Deny everything, pretend there's nothing to answer for, play the long game. I let her, because while she thought she was buying time, I was already setting up the final act. There was a dinner coming up, one hosted by her company, a formal thing, colleagues, clients, spouses invited. She had mentioned it weeks ago and told me not to come, said it was going to be boring and technical. I told her I understood, that I'd rather stay home anyway, but she didn't know I'd already RSVP'd as her plus one. I planned to walk in right when she least expected it. Dressed in the suit she said made me look desperate, with someone on my arm she wouldn't recognize but would definitely underestimate, because it wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about letting her realize how many steps behind she truly was. The night of her company dinner arrived wrapped in tension. It was one of those evenings where the sky hung low and gray like a curtain waiting to fall. I sat in the driveway for a while, car running, listening to the rhythmic click of the turn signal as I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that sets into your bones when you've spent too long pretending you're not falling apart. She left the house earlier that afternoon, hair curled, makeup sharp, wearing that sapphire dress she always said she saved for power nights. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up." And with that she was gone, off to the ballroom, off to Marshall, off to continue living in the fantasy she thought I hadn't cracked. I let 20 minutes pass. Then I picked up the phone. Margot pulled into my driveway exactly on time, looking like elegance incarnate. We hadn't spoken since that dinner with the raised glass and the silent destruction. She didn't ask me why I called her again. She just got out of the car, smoothed down her coat, and said, "You ready?" "No," I replied honestly, "but let's go anyway." The event was being held at a luxury hotel downtown, the kind of place Willa once said made her feel like she was living in the pages of a magazine. I had only ever seen it from the outside, usually as her Uber pulled away and I stood on the porch with a weak smile waving goodbye like some sitcom husband from the 90s. Inside, it was all chandeliers, polished marble, and forced laughter. I could feel the air tighten the moment we walked in. A man like me didn't fit in places like this, but with Margot beside me, heads turned. That part was satisfying. Not because I was trying to make a scene, but because I wanted Willa to feel the way I had felt for months, small, confused, out of place. We stepped into the main banquet hall just as the speeches were wrapping up. The lights were dimmed, the wine was flowing, and Marshall stood near the far table, whispering something into Willa's ear. She laughed, threw her head back like nothing in the world could touch her, and then she saw me. It happened in slow motion. First, Marshall noticed. His glass froze midair. He whispered something to her, confused. Then she followed his eyes, and her expression dropped. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me like I had crawled out of a memory she thought she'd buried. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I just pulled out a chair, sat down at the table closest to her, and asked Margot if she preferred white or red. People around us murmured. I could feel Willa's panic rising like heat through the floor. She looked around, calculating, trapped, like a magician realizing someone switched the rabbit with a viper. Finally she approached. Tight smile, jaw clenched. "Everett," she said coolly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm your plus one," I said flatly. "Didn't you check the list?" She blinked. That was the crack, the first real one. "I told you not to come," she said, low and fast. "And yet," I replied, sipping my drink, "here we are." She turned to Margot. "Seriously? You brought her?" Margot smiled like a queen holding court. "He invited me. I simply accepted." Marshall was hovering behind her now, eyes darting between the three of us like he'd landed in a scene he didn't audition for. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. "You're embarrassing yourself," Willa hissed. "No," I said, leaning back. "I've done that for years. This is something else." And before she could speak again, I slid the hotel keycard across the table. Not for me, not for Margot. It was one of the cards she'd accidentally photographed in that folder she thought I'd never find, same number, same location. Just a small, silent reminder that I had been paying attention long before she knew it. Willa didn't take the card. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. Margot stood. "We should be going." And we did. We walked out slowly, like we weren't the ones with shattered glass crunching beneath our heels. And Willa, the woman who built her empire of half-truths and carefully rehearsed denial, was left behind in her kingdom of whispers. But I wasn't done, because there was still one more performance she had to give, and this time it would be on my terms. The next morning, the silence in our house wasn't just quiet, it was dangerous. The kind that swells between two people when one of them knows they've been exposed, and the other is just waiting to see if they'll admit it. I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table again. She came down wearing that oversized hoodie she always wore on Sundays, the one that made her look younger, softer, like someone who hadn't torn apart an entire marriage with secret passwords and late night hotel bookings. She didn't speak right away, just made a show of opening the fridge, pretending to be normal, pretending we were fine. I didn't help her. Eventually, she sat across from me. You embarrassed me last night. I didn't even look at her. You embarrassed yourself a long time ago. Last night was just public. She flinched, but she covered it with a scoff. Is that what this is about? You needed a stage? You wanted to humiliate me? I finally met her eyes. No, I just wanted you to stop treating me like a placeholder. That cracked something. Her lips parted like she wanted to fight, but the words didn't come. And for once, I didn't try to fill the silence for her. I just sat with it. You were never supposed to know, she muttered, almost to herself. It wasn't serious. That word wasn't serious, as if that somehow shrunk the betrayal, as if intimacy could be measured by paperwork or promises. I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. You wrote an entire breakup speech in your notes app, I said. You had photos, reservations, backup lies. If that's not serious, I don't want to know what is. Her face paled. She hadn't realized I'd seen that much. You were reading my. I was living in a house where I didn't recognize the person sleeping next to me. Reading your notes was the least invasive thing I could have done. She stood abruptly. I made a mistake, Everett. No, I said. You made dozens. I just finally stopped ignoring them. She turned away, gripping the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I could see the gears spinning. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She was calculating the best way to rewrite the story, to make herself the tragic figure, the misunderstood wife. I can explain. Don't, I interrupted. I don't want the performance. I've had front row seats for years. And with that, I stood, walked past her, and up the stairs. I didn't slam the door. I didn't pack bags. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I just started preparing for the moment she'd realize she didn't have the final word. Because the next step wasn't about revenge. It was about finally setting myself free, with one very specific move she'd never see coming. For the next 2 days, we barely spoke. She floated around the house like a ghost in her own story, occasionally glancing at me like I was a page she didn't remember writing. Every now and then, she'd try to start a conversation. Do we need more paper towels? Or are you still going to your mom's this weekend? But I gave her nothing. Not coldness, not anger, just a complete absence of emotional currency. It drove her nuts. And that told me something important. Willie didn't miss me, she missed control, the ability to shape a room with her voice, to spin tension into guilt, and make herself the victim before I even had a chance to breathe. But now, she was flailing, and I hadn't even done anything drastic yet. Not really, but I was about to. On Thursday morning, I sent her a text from the other room. Be home by 7. There's someone I want you to meet. No emojis, no explanation. I knew she'd spiral all day. She hated not knowing. And judging by how quiet the house was when I got back from work, it had clearly worked. She was sitting on the edge of the couch in a different dress than usual, neat, presentable, soft colors, like she thought this was going to be some kind of peace talk, or worse, an apology dinner. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't be alone. At 7:03, the doorbell rang. She jumped. I didn't. I walked over calmly and opened the door. Standing there, in all her collected terrifying brilliance, was my sister in law. Now let me explain. No, this isn't one of those wild, I fell in love with her sister stories. Nothing like that. This was far more surgical. Lana, my brother's wife, used to work in digital compliance. She wasn't just smart, she was sharp. The kind of woman who read people before they even said a word. She and Willa were never close. Lana always said Willa smelled like someone who never planned to stay, and she was right. I had shown Lana everything, the synced files, the photos, the messages. I didn't ask her to hack anything or do anything illegal, but she'd helped me compile a timeline. Every lie, every overlapping reservation, every fabricated business trip. Willa's face went paper white the moment she saw her. Lana, she asked, eyes darting between us. What? What is this? I just thought it'd be good, I said calmly, to have someone here who can help us go over a few things. We sat down at the table. I had everything printed, dated, marked. I even highlighted the texts she had sent the day she told me she was at a wellness retreat while actually staying 2 blocks from Marshall's condo. At first, she tried to deny it. This is invasive. You had no right to dig into my personal. No, Lana cut in. He had every right. What you've been doing isn't just unethical, it borders on financial deception. Willa went quiet. She hadn't expected numbers to be involved. See, while I was silent during all her fake business trips, I was quietly gathering proof that she had used our joint savings to fund several of them: flights, hotels, gifts, even a rental car in Marshall's name paid from our account, and Lana had helped me cross reference it all. At this point, Willa realized this wasn't about tears or apologies. This was a presentation, a final one. Why are you doing this? She finally asked, voice brittle. You could have just left. I looked at her for a long moment. Because you never imagined I would. You thought I'd sit here forgiving, fading. You called me dumb. You said I'd never leave you. She flinched. She knew that was the text that started everything. Well, I continued, you were wrong. And then I slid one last folder across the table. Inside it, a signed agreement, one I had drawn up weeks ago with a lawyer Willa didn't even know I had retained. It outlined the financial split, the property terms, even the clauses involving what I'd share with her employer if she pushed back. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was just done letting her dictate the terms. This isn't a threat, I said. It's a choice. You can sign now, or you can deal with what happens if I file first with all of this attached. Willa stared at the folder. Her hands shook. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked scared. She didn't speak for a while. She just sat there, staring at the folder, the highlighted pages, the final line where her signature was supposed to go. And for once, Willa had no story to spin, no performance, no elegant monologue about confusion or rediscovery. Just silence. Eventually, she signed. No drama, no screaming. She didn't even look up. It was the quietest ending to the loudest betrayal I'd ever lived through. She moved out 2 days later. No grand exit, no apology note left on the counter, just an empty hanger where her favorite coat used to be, and a subtle perfume trace on the bathroom towel rack. I stood in the doorway after she left and waited to feel broken, but I didn't, because for the first time in years, the air in the house felt still and safe. Margot checked in on me. So did Lana. Even my brother sent a text that just said, proud of you, even if you still make bad playlists. I chuckled. I actually chuckled. That was new. I started sleeping again, not perfectly, not without dreams, but real sleep. The kind where you wake up and don't immediately dread the day. I replaced the mattress. I repainted the walls. I deleted the shared calendar. And one morning, while I was drinking coffee on the porch, the same spot where I'd once watched her car disappear down the street, I realized I was no longer waiting for someone to come home. I was home. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I still wonder how I missed all the signs. Other days I look in the mirror and see a guy who finally remembered that he deserved honesty, that staying silent to keep someone else's world from crumbling was never the same as peace. And you know what? I've started making pancakes again. Even the burnt ones taste better now. Thanks for sticking through the entire story. If you've ever been in a moment where the truth hit you like a thunderclap, maybe a message, a slip up, a look you weren't supposed to see, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Share it in the comments below. And don't forget, this is Reddit Confessions, where every twist leads to something unexpected. See you in the next one.